message said San Juan and Race for the Galaxy. And
Excellent.
Chris put Puerto Rico on the table. What happened, Chris?
You know, I saw Race for the Galaxy, went looking for that one, and then my brain said San Juan, Puerto Rico.
I mean, I get it. It's a town in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, it's got it on the
It's
board game.
the
So
town in Puerto Rico.
That's where my mind went. So
And the boxes are very similar.
yes, they are.
They're almost the same, really, except for the size.
And the name of the game on the top.
And the text on the box.
Yeah. Sorry, I got confused.
So Puerto Rico is the granddaddy of BGG #1 games.
This one should get a lot of hits, right?
I don't think so. I think it's pretty much fallen out of favor.
I agree for a number of reasons, but I think part of it is it's just old enough now that they, you know, the modern board gamer has decided that this game is now officially old and new stuff is always better.
Yeah. I think one of the good things about this game, though, is a lot of people have played it, so they'll understand or have seen the components or played with it to kind of understand what we talk about.
Okay, Boomer.
Wait, who's calling who a boomer?
Yeah, I know. I am in fact, I am the only boomer here. I just squeeze in as a boomer. But
Congratulations, Boomer.
This is almost 20 years old. This is 2005, maybe.
It's an old game.
So, and we're recording in 2023. So, new model year starts October 1st. This game is 24 years old soon.
It's
2002.
So this game is
21.
20 years old. Okay.
It's a game from a different time.
Yeah.
We'll acknowledge that the theming is problematic.
The theming is pretty problematic.
We'll move past that because it's been done to death. But it's a game that's been around for a long time, and it's one of those that gamers of our age,
Your age.
so gamers of a certain age have all been exposed to Puerto Rico, and we were talking about reasons it's gone out of favor. It's also a game that's kind of been solved, or I know there are ways to quote unquote play and not play.
Yeah, I agree.
There's like a scripted first
It
3 rounds.
It has best practices all over it now, and anybody who's looked on the internet knows what those are.
I recall playing this in the open gaming room of an Origins one year, and I made the wrong move, and I was told about it. And they would not proceed with the game until I took it back and made the correct move.
Wow.
So,
Did you? That's not you. You usually would stand your ground and say.
Oh, I left.
I was going to say.
I played 2 more turns with them and realized that this was not a game I wanted to be in, even though I liked Puerto Rico at the time. I just was like, all right, guys, I got no, and just walked away.
Hey, look at that. What's that over there? Squirrel.
Yeah, that's me leaving the table. Well, I got to be honest with you. It's been a long time since I've played this. I'm going to have to remember how to play again. I mean, I know how to play, but knowing how to play well is going to have to come back to me. So,
Yeah, it's back in the day, this was like complicated as far as games went. This was as heavy a Euro as was on the market. There was things like Settlers and Carcassonne and whatever, but this was like the meaty, crunchy game. And I'm sitting here looking at the pieces, and I'm like, I remember how to play this, even though I haven't played it in 15 years.
Yeah, I just went through the rules, and it's not that
Yeah, it's
heavy.
not
There's
bad
not
at
a high
all.
level of complexity to it. no.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I can recall like this being a game when we first brought it out at Chris's house. Y'all had experience with it. My first time, I just would look at it and I'd be like, I can't figure this out. I don't understand what's going on. This is all too complicated for me. And, in the grand scheme of things, based on the games that we play now, it's actually pretty darn simple.
from a rules perspective.
Yeah.
But the one thing that this game does have going on is there's really tight binding between the players, whereas I think a lot of modern games, you look at a game like Arc Nova, which has a far more complicated rule set and a whole lot more options than this does, but to a large extent, what the other people are doing at the table can't have a whole lot of impact into what you're doing. I mean, a little bit here and there. This is a game where, like you were saying, Stephen, there is a generally accepted correct move, because if you're not playing defense for the people to your left, you're you're giving away stuff, and that's going to hurt. So I mean, there's a lot of binding between the players in this game.
And I think you're right. That's something that's in a lot of cases fallen out of fashion, right? I mean, there's a lot of more recent games where, yeah, you're playing with other people and you can even be competing, but you're not really...
You're largely left to your own devices
Yeah.
and not affecting the play of others.
Yeah, it largely doesn't matter what they do. It's just, I'm going to build a better engine than you, and maybe you take an opportunity from me, but you're not like impacting how my turn goes.
Yeah, there's a couple small opportunities, like taking away the trade. You trade something before somebody else, put something on a ship, not allowing that person to ship that cargo.
Right,
That's
well,
about,
we're
I'm saying that there's a lot of that.
Yeah,
in
there's
this
a lot
game.
of that here, but compared to like, you mentioned Ark Nova, Terraforming Mars, even like Scythe, which is nominally a war game, right?
It's nominally a area control game.
Well,
nominally a dude's game.
Yeah, whatever.
you can fight each other, but there's still not a lot of like,
Still about scoring points.
yeah, it's about scoring points. I'm not going to prevent you from doing something on your turn by taking an action on my turn.
Yeah. One more thing about Scythe. It's a nominally played game as well.
Ouch.
So,
Sure is pretty though.
that's
There's a, and I love the aesthetic.
Yeah, it's very pretty.
the aesthetic is nice. So, bringing that point to a close, this is, and so we talked about how games these days, like there's a lot of things that you can do, but they don't really affect your opponents, but you're like building your own thing. I love how this game, while not being direct confrontational, is very indirect with its confrontation. And that indirect confrontation is also very impactful. Because like Chris said, if I take the shipping action before it gets around to him, then I could potentially ship goods in a way
That locks him out.
Yeah. And then he's not able to take that until probably 2 or 3 rounds around the table based on how the rolls are selected.
Yeah.
And that's the other really cool thing about this game. I love the pick a roll and everyone follows type of gameplay. Like, I think that's one of my favorite mechanics. It shows up in this, it shows up in Puerto Rico and San Juan, it also shows up in Race to the Galaxy, and then there are probably dozens of other ones I just can't think of at the moment. But I tend to like that mechanic as a game device.
It's enjoyable because it means that everybody's doing something on everyone's turn, right? It's not just
You do have to pay attention, yeah.
I did my turn, and now I'm going to
Pick up my phone and...
zone out until it's my turn again. And, maybe Steven's doing really well, and he's going to take 5 minutes, and I'm just not going to care. Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you're active during every turn, essentially, unless you get, blocked out of a space. But let's give this a go. It's Puerto Rico. It's a classic. It's problematic in theming. There's a new version that addresses that, but this is the one we have, so this is the one we're going to play.
And it's all set up on the table and ready to go.
Oh, it was so nice.
It was here when I showed up.
It was such a pleasant surprise.
You're welcome.
Well, Chris, you won. How about that game?
Hey, I was very happy that my engine got rolling, and it did well.
Yeah, sitting to the left of Chris sucked.
Yeah, and you're a guy who gets the engine rolling well in lots of games. So I think
sitting to the
that's
right
sort
of Chris wasn't much better.
I mean, you had control over what he did. I never had control over what happened before him.
All right, next time we'll switch spots.
Okay,
Please.
we can rotate.
I'll do a lot better.
This is our usual table setup.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right?
Every once in a while,
Sit
John will come sit in yours.
Yeah, usually you and I will switch.
But I mean, you're right. In some games, that really matters, and maybe it wouldn't be a bad thing to switch things up.
And in this game, that's what everybody says: is your seat position can actually make a big difference. But I think we were pretty much taking the best play. I mean, the one thing about Puerto Rico, and I think one of the reasons why it's kind of a social game, is pretty much everything is out on the table except for like the victory points you've already gotten. So like you spend the entire time telling other people what to do. You should really take Trader right now. I think that's your best option.
And that brings the caveat to anytime Chris says something to you,
I was going to say
you need to
it
analyze
Chris
the crap out of it.
I mean, is anyone surprised that Chris won?
Because I'm like 3 layers deep. I'm like, well, if I tell him this, he won't do it. So let me tell him this.
And to be
and
fair,
then I'll
Chris,
point this one out too.
And to be, sometimes you'll make it a suggestion that actually does work for the other guy, as long as it also works for you.
Doesn't always have to work for me.
I mean, that's how the game works, though, right? I mean, it's
that's part of the game.
Because everybody gets to benefit from every action.
Sometimes.
Most of the time.
That's part of the game. And to be, and years ago when we played this game, I used to sit there and think, wow, this game's kind of deep. I mean, there's sort of something going on. And we played it tonight, and I'm like, this game isn't as deep as I remember it. So I get the feeling some of the stuff we've been playing recently, games like Mosaic, where, I mean, there's just a crap ton of stuff out on the board. This game is relatively straightforward in its presentation. I'm not saying there isn't thinking going on here, but there's just not as much to keep track of.
Yeah, there's not as much mechanical complexity.
Yeah, so there's kind of a, the old German style game was a game designed to learn and play in an evening, and it could be like a family game. And I think Puerto Rico still manages to pull that off, even though it's sort of late in that time frame for modern gaming. But we've gotten so far away from that with Ameritrash kind of stomping in and making a big difference. So you end up with games like Eclipse that have a lot of Euro-esque mechanics in them, but they also still have the bigness, and I think games are just bigger, more complex machines.
It's a beautiful game.
Than they were.
I mean, it's interesting because we're talking about like mechanical depth, right? But when it comes to like strategic depth,
strategery,
yeah, like the decision space
and
that you're dealing with,
tactical tree,
and tactical tree, yeah, whatever. I think Puerto Rico is probably more complicated than a lot of the big mechanically complex games, where you do have to, if you're playing well, you're thinking about what's the next person going to do? What are things going to look like a round from now? How do I need to plan?
You're actually kind of looking at, like on a round, you're actually looking at what the 4 roles are going to be and probably trying to figure out what order they'll be in so you can set yourself up.
Yeah. And I'm not saying I did a good job of that, because I did not.
I did not either.
But that's something you could do. That's something you could put a lot of time into. Whereas if you're playing one of those bigger games, that doesn't really apply, right? You're just kind of hoping that you make better choices than everybody else at the table.
Yeah, and there's not the binding. I mean, when you're playing this game, you sit there and say, okay, I want to do trader. And the first thing you do is you kind of look around and say, okay, who else is getting money out of this? So, you're immediately eyeballing. It's like, okay, I am going to get an advantage, but so are the other 3 players. So that kind of binding is there. I mean, it's not... It's a different kind of... you're not doing something to somebody else, but you're potentially providing them with opportunity. So you need to kind of figure out where you need to lay off and say, look, if you want to get money by trading stuff in, that's your business. You need to take that action.
Yeah,
I'm going to find an action.
I think opportunity is a good word, because that's what it is. Is every time you take an action, you have to consider how or what opportunity you're providing everyone else, right? Like Chris snookered me out of a lot of points because of when he chose to take the captain option.
Right.
And
especially with him being to your left, that means you're the 4th man getting in on the ship, so you just have to hope for
there were
best.
like 3 captain where you can actually ship things out and get points, where I didn't get any points because the boats were full.
With stuff that you couldn't mix.
That kind of kept on falling into my lap, it seemed, because John was taking craftsman a lot, and you were taking builder because you had this
so you
monetary.
were the number 2 guy.
Yeah, and
I wanted
there's
to
only
build.
3 boats out there, and so if you take a look around, you figure out who's going to be able to ship. I wanted to ship as much as possible. A couple times I took my own ship and.
If we played again, I would focus more on production and shipping. But I like building. And whatever.
For the trader, where you trade.
For the merchant, you got at least 1 gold.
No, I was always throwing sugars, and then I always had the ability to put a second sugar in, so that let me get the 2, because corn doesn't
intentionally, because when you take the trade action, you sell stuff you sell your goods down at the market, then you have to consider the opportunity cost of what you're providing the other players.
And see, with 4 players. Because that card doesn't change based on player count, right? It's always 4.
It's always 4.
So if you got 5 people, somebody could get boxed out simply because the 4 players before you could each do a different good. Or if there's only 1 in there, then you could get by.
I mean, frankly, what
a
happened
lot easier to get
this time a lot is there were 3 spaces full, and I'd take it and just fill up the last space.
I did that a couple times too. With the Indigo, it's like I get 1 gold, 1 money, but if I don't,
nobody else gets anything else.
Well, it was all for you. Put stuff in there, and it was like, well, if I don't do that, then these 2 guys that have the office, they can go ahead and do it again next turn, and I'm not going to get anything.
Right.
So let me do it because I do have a tobacco here that maybe I
and then
can
it'll
sell
be
later.
open next time, and you've got a shot to do it again.
Yeah.
Right. So it is a game where you have to play a couple of turns down the road. And there's some modern games that don't really do that. Of course, it's hard to say modern game because modern games. I look at the Kickstarter announcement on Reddit each week, and it's 8 or 10 games every week. So that means there's 500 games a year coming out.
Just through Kickstarter.
Right, and that's just.
Are they all coming out, or are all just announced?
Well,
I mean, I'm still waiting on a couple games.
So there's merely 200 every year coming out. So what I'm saying is modern.
You have to look 3 years in the past to see how many are actually coming out.
Yeah,
this
I'd
year.
like to see that. Is like, what is the success rate on Kickstarters and them actually putting a game out?
My point being is that there is not a central tendency to the industry anymore. There's just so much stuff coming out. Stuff is kind of all over the place. When Puerto Rico came out, there was kind of a flavor that things kind of were going in that was considered the state of the art. Yeah, there were 6 or 8 good games coming out in the year that people wanted to go after. I mean, there was other stuff coming out too, but now, I mean, it's just, I mean, depending on the day you look at your webpage, it could be something completely different.
Yeah.
So I think trying to typify anything as a modern game now is pretty doggone difficult. Where I think Puerto Rico kind of set a trend. It came out in an era. It came out before worker placement was a big thing. It came out before deck building was a big thing. I think this was kind of doing what Euros did back then with tile placement. The only thing it doesn't have a map. I mean, a little bit at the top, but not enough that it matters. So, but I mean, this was kind of ringing out what the state of the art was at the time, and it kind of was a trendsetter, and that's why it was the number 1 game on BGG for years. So the summary I'm coming away from this is Puerto Rico, and setting all the thematic aroma aside, Puerto Rico mechanically is now a dated game. It's in the ancients category. It's in the how games used to work category, because I don't think anybody's riffing on Puerto Rico's mechanical structure in modern games, which is kind of crazy. If there's 8 or 10 a week being announced, you figure something would stumble into it.
Yeah. But I think you stepped on it earlier with this game is, we call it GACMED, where it's generally approved.
Generally accepted correct move in this situation. Yeah, it's my tortured acronym.
Because I can sit there and I can think, okay, the best move for Steven to make is going to be this. Yeah. This is probably what he'll make. This, I can kind of figure that out and what's going to come around to me.
Right.
But it's also, I look at Steven and it's like, hey, that's going to be the best move for him, and he does it, and you can kind of figure that out. And that wasn't terribly exciting to the game for me. Was you kind of feel like you're being pushed into
you're on rails. Yeah. Right. So, well, I pretty much have to do this, at which point Steven's pretty much going to have to do that, and I'll make out from that. Yeah. Right. So it's
and
kind of...
That is a negative, right?
Yeah,
there's
it's destiny.
There's no randomness in this game.
Well, you think about it, too.
The plantations, but...
You think about it, too, is we ended the game, the last round, the 3 end game conditions got met.
Right.
So,
and frankly, I think that was kind of... I mean,
that usually happens.
Maybe not, but I was keeping an eye on when the conditions were going, and I was kind of figuring that, because you don't want to put all your buildings out, because then you're going to be lacking in the points, and you don't want to, grab all the points, because then someone's going to have been built up.
The game, right.
I think we had a pretty good balance. Like, you were buying buildings, you were getting the big buildings out. I was taking a lot of the victory points, and...
Yeah, I buildinged out, so I filled my
but
top half.
You do want to. There's an awareness, I think, that if you want to do well, you have to balance, right? Because if you specialize too hard in one area, then you're going to have a deficit you can't make up.
Yeah. See, and in the old days, they used to talk about the corn strategy, or I forget what the other ones were, but I mean, there were 2 or 3 approaches to winning at Puerto Rico that you could go after.
Yeah. I mean, it helped me out quite a bit having that small warehouse to where I didn't have to get rid of sugar.
Yeah.
And then
you could turn it into money.
Yeah. somebody would do craftsman, and then all of a sudden I get to do the captain, and I could fill up an entire boat because I had
You had
three
leftovers
from the time
Yeah,
before.
I mean, I threw away so many goods because I didn't build a warehouse.
Yeah.
I should have. But there's only 2. So what are you gonna do?
There's a small warehouse and a large warehouse.
There was a small and a large. So I could have. I think I still could have built a large warehouse, but
the smalls were gone.
I never got to it.
Yeah, smalls went quick. So, all right. So call the tune. I mean, who won? Chris, you won.
Chris
So
won
you,
handily.
You get by 13 points over the second place. So what do you think of this old man game sitting on the edge of the table here?
Are you asking me to rate it according to Board Game Geek?
That's the scale I would use.
You should
At
you
this
should
point.
rate it based on what you feel in your heart. In your heart.
My heart of hearts.
You can't ignore the elephant in the room.
That's true.
Setting aside that, and there is a new version which apparently is more or less the same game. I've had people tell me it's completely different, and I've had somebody else tell me no, it's the exact same game. It's just they've rethemed
You know,
it.
honestly, I haven't paid attention to it. Like, I know it's there, but
And we just haven't gotten to it. I have not seen it in a store.
We've got 2 copies of Puerto Rico that we don't play. Why do we need a third one? Like,
so that we can sleep at night, Stephen.
I mean, once I put the box back,
I play a
And then
game where
even
you can
still,
eventually drop nuclear bombs on your enemy. So I mean, there's plenty of ugly in all sorts of games.
I mean,
Puerto Rico used to rank pretty high in my games that I would like to play.
Yeah.
And people would come over. I'd like to, hey, let's play a game of Puerto Rico. It's a good introductory game for people.
So it's clearly a 10.
No, because, it's been 7 years, was 2016 since I last played this game.
Yeah.
And so I think I could wait another 7 years before I play the next game. So I'm going to rate it a 7.
Okay. Other things have come along, essentially.
There's other games that are ranked higher priority that I enjoy. Now, I enjoyed tonight's game. I mean, always winning does help.
And it is a social game where you're knocking it around, so it's a good game with friends.
It also helps to know who you're playing, because I can kind of predict.
Yeah, and I'll even put it 2 ways. One is it helps to know, if you know how they would play a game, it helps from that. But the other thing is, I think it's a game where 4 people that know each other well, just from a social aspect, this isn't a game you want to sit down in a game store and play with 3 people you've never met before, because there's a knocking it around sort of aspect to it, that there's a more social aspect to it that I think works better either with family or with close friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you're going to get that on a game night at your local store at a convention.
Yeah.
and I mean, kind of circling back around, it's that whole, this trend of making essentially multiplayer solitaire games.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you need to be social in a situation like that, other than just being social? Like a game like this, you have to be social within the context of the game because everybody's involved in everybody's turn. And
and there's
and not
an
just
element
your
of
own movement,
haggling and
somebody else's
gamesmanship and
Yeah.
maneuvering.
Yeah.
And I mean, if I didn't know Sam so well, I would have had a hard time screwing somebody that many times with the sailboats.
And
I'm captaining.
I got to admit, a couple of times I was able to snooker him out of that, too, where I would steal a ship with, 1 sugar and say, suck on this, and he wouldn't be able to get something sold. So it was we were pretty awful. Sam, I apologize for all the things that I did.
No,
so now that your apology is done, let's get your rating.
Well, it's number 2, right? So I was number 1. John,
number
you came
2.
in number 2. So
it's
I hand it over to you.
Yeah, and frankly, I mean, coming into tonight, I'm like, okay, so this is like an all-star game with all sorts of accolades, and for the longest time, everybody's waiting. What's Seyfarth's next game going to be? Because this is the most wonderful thing since sliced bread, and we played it tonight. I'm like, okay, it's a solid 7. I mean, it's a good game, and I'd play it again, but like you, I think there's a whole bunch of stuff that I would love to push into the queue in front of it. So, I mean, maybe we'll play it at the next May Game-a-thon, but if I don't see it before then, I don't have a particular problem with that.
I'm glad we knocked a game out.
It's a good game from history, but not one that you need to be getting out to your table all the time.
So there are things about Puerto Rico that I think would be that I'd like to see kind of come back in favor in the gaming zeitgeist. So the whole, getting past the multiplayer solitaire and having things that aren't like, in your face, like battle, like skirmish games, because that's like on the other end of it. But having games that have interaction that isn't necessarily conflict driven.
Yeah, and I almost don't know if I'd call it interaction. It's repercussions. What you choose to do is going to provide other players opportunity.
Yeah.
And I suppose you could call that interaction, but it's not. Nobody's banging heads in this game. It is
until you screw Sam out of
right,
a boat,
and you're just gloating about how much you were able to screw me over.
Yeah, actually, it was a fair amount.
Yeah.
The more I think about it.
So,
and also, speaking of player opposition, right? I really liked the limited upgrades. There were only like 2 of each building, right? And those buildings all had really good effects for the most part, and like they were pretty much
scarcity was actually
right. There's 4 of us.
It builds
playing.
a little bit of drama.
Right, there's 4 of us playing, but there's only 2 of each building, and they were definitely buildings. I was like, dang, I should have built that.
Some of them you have to buy things like a coffee roaster and a tobacco, I don't know, whatever it is, the factory tobacco hut. So I mean, some of your dollars have to go just to getting your production rolling. So those other buildings that you want to get to, it's like, well, yeah, but I got to get my farm going.
And really, I screwed myself about halfway through the game when I built a university.
That was real early.
Well, my mind went, if I build a university, I'm banking on being able to get more money so I can construct more buildings and fill them for free, and that'll work out. And then I never got the money I needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you burned up $10 doing that.
I should have spent that money on just getting more money.
Yeah. So putting those two like concepts together, the fact that it's a game where everyone's constantly involved and there's repercussions or interaction, however you want to talk about it, and then that scarcity of the upgrades that you can buy, building a little bit of drama at the table. With those two things combined, this is easily a 7, and I think at some point everyone should play Puerto Rico at least one time.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those games on your short list of lifetime. You need to get a game of this in.
Yeah. I wouldn't say you're not a gamer if you've never played Puerto Rico. Like people will say that, and it just is like, let people play what they want to play and let them label themselves the way they want to label themselves.
And quit being so uptighty about that stuff.
That whole BS is gatekeepery. It just pisses me off when it goes on. Anyway, I do highly recommend that everybody play this game at least one time. It's a piece of gaming history, and there are concepts that are happening in this game that I can't think of examples of it being done better.
And in other places. And if anything,
except for Imminent Domain, because Imminent Domain is like one of the greatest games ever made.
Yeah, okay.
Sure.
So if nothing else, if you are a budding game designer, it's worth playing this just so you can dissect how
for sure.
things work.
There's a lot of different game elements here that are worth thinking about.
No. So, Samuel, if you're thinking about this game,
I mean, it's classic. It is. Like you said, there's a lot of gaming history here. And from a mechanical standpoint, there's, the different roles impact everyone on the table. You have to think to the future and look ahead and try to project what the game state's going to be 2 turns down the road. And there's a lot of scarcity here, right? From, actually getting...
Jeez, everything's scarce in it.
I mean, really, like the upgrades are scarce.
I mean, you know how y'all screwed me the most with colonists. Like, there was not a single turn until the very end of the game that I got 2 colonists at one.
Right.
I mean, I only ever got 1.
I think every single resource in this game it feels scarce, right?
Yeah, and the fact that you're fighting for 3 or 4 of them means you're always putting out a fire. You're never plush enough that you can say, okay, I get to do something fat.
There's never enough. You never have enough money. You never have enough goods. You never have enough people, etc. Right? There's always something, but at the same time, none of those felt arbitrary, right? And there was an action you could take to help with that. Pretty much constantly, there was either
you had to pick which one.
You just had to pick what you were going to do, and it's like, okay, well, I need to produce more goods, and if nobody else picks that, I'm going to have to, right? Or I'm going to build something, and if somebody else picks it, well, they get to build before I do, but I still might be able to build what I need, right? There's a really there's some elegance there, right? That's why the game's a classic.
Yeah, and the thing I'll add is clearly very well tested and very well balanced before it was ever released.
Yeah.
And that's why all that scarcity all manages to work in concert together.
Yeah, I agree.
So I mean, go ahead. Go ahead and do your
That said, it does really feel like a solved game. Right, where if you sat down and kind of like mathed it out, you could say, okay, I'm going to, like the first, I think you mentioned before, like first 3 rounds.
Yeah, you can go on the forums and there's like up to 50 rounds, or up to
50 turns,
like up to 50 turns, but it kind of breaks down based on like what
plantations
come out.
I was gonna say, like that's the only randomness.
That's the only like randomness.
But you know, but chess gets messed up with that too. Everybody says, "Well, this is the programmed opening," but at some point, usually relatively early on, in whatever programmed opening you're doing, somebody does something different. And they go, "Oh, okay, so now everything's off."
Yeah.
I mean, you need to start working
but
from there.
The fact of the matter is that there is a best opening for at least a certain amount of
until
rounds,
somebody
right?
decides to stir the
until
pot.
somebody decides to stir the pot, and I don't enjoy that as much, right? Because I know that there is one. I don't want to follow it, but
See, Sam, that's why you need dice in the game.
Yep. And that's why playing it every 7 years
It's plenty.
Right?
It's
Like,
fine.
So you can forget.
I enjoyed this playthrough. I think I would enjoy a second playthrough. I'd do a bit better. I'd be like, okay, I'm keeping an eye out for this. By the third playthrough, I think it'd be stale.
Yeah.
I think I'd go, all right, it's going this way again. So I'm glad we played it. I wouldn't be terribly sad if we didn't play it again for 7 years.
I'd be curious to play the new version. I'd love to see the new thematics. Yeah. I think that could be very interesting too.
So
I mean, I'm always, it's kind of like when we play any of the VCR games, or what's the other one? The Adventurers. Like if we only play them like every other year or every 2 or 3 years,
you forget
it's
about
enough
it.
time to forget where all the different lava tiles are. So you can't memorize which ones are lava and which ones aren't. And you can't remember where all the good treasures are. So, and then like, you forget when the gatekeeper is going to yell at you because you haven't played it in 2 years. So, this is a game where, every couple of years you can pull it out and you would completely forget what that opening move is. Did you give this a number?
I didn't.
What number would you give it, Sam?
I'll give it a 7.
All right.
Only out of respect for its place in gaming history.
It is time for the gatekeeper to reappear. Maggot.
The only good gatekeeping is when you're playing Nightmare.
And he's the crypt keeper? Or
He's
the
actually,
gatekeeper?
I thought he was the crypt
gatekeeper.
keeper.
The crypt keeper is Tales from the Crypt.
Tales from the Crypt, yeah.
So it's yes, my gatekeeper.
Too many keepers.
So that's the only acceptable gatekeeper is in Nightmare or Atmosphere or whatever version it is that you have.
I don't think anyone's going to understand what you're talking about.
Many people will.
and
Only true gamers.
If they don't,
You're not a real gamer.
All right.
There's some gatekeeping for you.
All right. If anybody listening to this understands what he's talking about, let us know in the Discord.
Atmosphere, spelled with an F-E-A-R on the end. It's worth looking up. Look it up on YouTube before you look it up anywhere else.
You don't even need a VCR anymore. It's
That's right.
Right
It's
there
on
on
YouTube.
YouTube.
It's right there on YouTube. That's how we played it the last time, right?
I think so, yeah.
Are we done?
It's hard to rent houses with VCRs these days.
Yeah, right? I don't have a VCR anymore.
All right, so that's Puerto Rico.
Gold sucker.